Yesterday I was scrolling on Twitter and I had the misfortune of seeing this screenshot. She's the emo concert photographer struggling to face her past. He's the masked metalcore bassist trying to erase his. Ooh. Immediately I thought, this is hilarious. A romance novel that's metalcore themed, a genre prone to inappropriate dating stuff. What a good joke poking fun at book talk or whatever. But I did some digging and I found out that there are actually multiple videos about this book. All of them are posted by one person, and that one person appears to be the author, so that made finding the book really easy. It's called Madness, a masked metalcore rockstar romance. And I cannot believe it's real. You know a genre has reached a level of commercialization when stuff like this exists. You know what I mean? How long before we get a gore grind romance novel? It has potential. We lock eyes at obscene extreme. The smell of beer and vomit waft through the air. I was on my way to the porta potties when I saw her and my heart skipped a D-beat. Now before I buy this book, I should clarify that I don't really read romance novels. I know, shocking. So even though I will be poking fun, I want to make sure it's super clear that I have no authority over the subject. I just saw the title and I thought it would make for a good video, so here we are. It might suck, it might not even be interesting or funny, but I'm still going to turn it into a video because I just spent $20 on a copy and I'm not going to let that money go to waste. It'll arrive sometime next week, so I'll see you then. Just a warning before we get started. This book is the physical embodiment of the year 2013 on Tumblr, and it has one of the most insane endings I've ever read. And if you think that that sounds interesting, I assure you I mean it in the most derogatory way. I don't know why I'm deciding to follow up 3 extremely solid videos with a low-effort filler video on a smut book, but it's been a while since I've read a book on this channel and it seemed funny, and I'm filming this on Valentine's Day, so why not? Let's get romantic. I used to make videos like this when I was just barely starting off making YouTube videos, and they are not high quality, but they are fun, so screw it, I'm doing it. Before the book begins, on just the first few pages, there is, and I'm not making this up, a note saying that it's not a phase, this background image, and a Jack Skellington quote. When I said this book is very 2013 Tumblr, I was not exaggerating. This is like the emo equivalent of putting a Like a Boss rage comic in your book. I'm sure teenagers still post stuff like this on Tumblr even now, but considering this is an 18+ book, I'm not really sure who it's pandering to. However, it also includes an official playlist, which I've never seen a book do before. So credit where credit is due, that is actually a very smart addition, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so it starts off as Andy, one of our main protagonists, makes her way into her concert photography job at Dead Tower Records, which despite being a metalcore label, I guess is like a multi-million-dollar corporation that has a skyscraper in New York City and a big lobby with hundreds of employees, which I don't think is accurate, but like, that's what it is in the book. All the employees speak in slang terms that no one actually says in real life, which is a little distracting. This kind of thing happens a few times in the book, by the way. Like at one point, a character says, "Holy shirt balls." And I'm not sure if that's autocorrect or just being cringe, but there's a lot of that. She gets assigned to photograph her brother's band, Young Decay, but she doesn't want to do it because she's nervous to go home because of her past. But the CEO offers to triple her pay, give her a nice car, and a nice hotel to stay in because she cannot risk another photographer trying to get a photo of the mysterious masked bassist. Which, by the way, this book treats being a photographer to a metalcore band with the same intensity of being like the president's bodyguard. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's not that. The perks are mostly nothing, to be frank. Anyways, the CEO then goes on to describe said mysterious masked bassist, and ladies, you are gonna love this. Keep in mind, this is the main lead to a dark romance novel. Whatever mask he wears has got to be pretty sexy. And, it is a skeletal neck gaiter. You know, those things that you only see at gas stations from men that aren't anti-mask per se, but never wore a real one at any point throughout the pandemic. It's one of those. Sexy, right? You could go to like any paintball center and find 10 guys wearing this exact thing. This is like the edgy equivalent of a plumber's crack, and it is the main focal point in a romance novel. Not only is that a crazy choice that would give most rational people the ick, we are only on page 5. So, So buckle up. Anyway, she takes the job, she meets the band, and the two love interests are immediately smitten. And right off the bat, their chemistry is confusing. Like, no exaggeration, they are basically going, golly, I hope she likes me, but she probably doesn't even know I exist. While simultaneously basically just reenacting that one scene from Walk Hard. Like, you gotta pick one. Like, obviously shyness and nervousness can coexist with sexuality, but the first few chapters are written in a way where it's trying to do complete opposite sides of the spectrum simultaneously in a way that does not work at all. This whole time, by the way, Mr. Maddox Gator Mask Man has an internal monologue that I think is supposed to be hot, but it's just a red flag, I'm telling you. There's a lot of talk of like, no, she's not mine to take. I can't control myself any longer. And like, I understand what it's going for, but this kind of speech pattern of like claiming and owning and not being able to control yourself like only works if you're Nosferatu and you have cosmic allure, not if you're a metalcore bassist wearing one of these talking to a woman wearing Jack Skellington socks. You know what I mean? It just comes off as extremely Harley Quinn to my Joker type relationship dynamics, and buckle up because it gets so much worse. Anyways, the band does some press circuit stuff on the radio while Andy takes photos and Maddox texts her. The texts are repeatedly framed as harmlessly, lightly flirting, but if you read the words, they are almost literally translating to "you should masturbate to my cock later," which, like, maybe I'm just a prude. I don't think that's harmless, light flirting. Personally, I think that the pre-relationship, just friends, but slightly flirting a bit, will they, won't they phase is, like, really exciting and special, yet this book depicts it as just sexting outright, which is stupid. I know it's a smut book, so it's just speeding up to get to the good stuff, but like, as a result, their dynamic just like doesn't really make like much sense. Anyways, after the press circuit stuff, they go to a party, and at said party, things take a turn because it turns out Andy's ex-boyfriend, Adam Vanderhall, is here, and he's been organizing the protesters trying to shut down all the Young Decay shows. If it sounds like that comes out of nowhere, it does. I promise I'm not doing a bad job recounting the events. The book is kind of just like this, so buckle up. But basically, he's in the city council, and he's trying to like ban rock music or some shit, and basically Adam Vanderhall is Elon Musk, and our main character, Andy, is Grimes, dealing with her ultra-wealthy Republican boyfriend, and this book's villain. Adam Vanderhall then proceeds to taunt Maddox, revealing that he knows of his mysterious past, and that if word gets out, it would be the end of him and Young Decay as we know it. Which finally means that we now have some stakes. We have some mystery. Yeah, it's coming from what is essentially a Disney Channel villain, but like, okay, I'm interested. I'm poking fun at the book, obviously, but I will say, at this point, I was actually kind of interested as to what's gonna happen. What are these dark, mysterious pasts? Is the band gonna break up? How are they gonna deal with this villain character? I'll admit, I'm a little interested. But before we could get into all of that, I feel like I should address something that you've all probably noticed. A lot of the names are fucking stupid. I'm skipping over a lot of minor characters that don't really matter, but the moment I read the sentence, "She went to pick up Camden and Cohen," I audibly groaned. Maddox, Torning, Adam Vanderhall. Do I have to be in a different tax bracket for these names to feel normal? Like, I never understood why people do this. Andy's name, spoiler alert, gets revealed to be Anderson, which is goofy. The Matrix, if Neo grew up in an upper middle class Christian family, be like Mr. Anderson. This joke sucks. Anyways, the next chapter opens with a Spotify code, which leads me to one of the things I briefly mentioned that I think is actually pretty cool about this book. Some chapters have their own specifically curated soundtrack, which is genuinely cool. And since my channel is kind of based around talking about music, we're gonna do a little mini segment called
Judging Maddox's Music Taste.
Alright, so this is Mad's Comfort Zone, and the naming of this playlist is kind of confusing for reasons that will make sense later, but for now, let's just go with it. This playlist does have a few bangers, but also a few genuinely hilarious choices. Music taste is subjective, so take everything I say with a massive grain of salt, but Korn, Nine Inch Nails, My Chem, Slipknot, Linkin Park, System of a Down, very middle school, getting into metal coded, but also very consistently reliable, great songs that are legendary for a reason while still accessible. Honestly, hell yeah, 2 thumbs up. I know people probably want me to be an elitist dick, but these are actually some very solid choices, especially for some random romance novel, you know? But then there's also just 303, which, like, I love that song, but it's a bit out of place. There's also Kings of Leon, which is one of the biggest bands I didn't know anyone actually listened to. Avenged Sevenfold, Papa Roach, Hollywood Undead, Falling in Reverse is even mentioned. This is when the quality noticeably starts to dip drastically. High Hopes by Panic at the Disco is on here, and I did not know anyone listened to that song voluntarily. I thought that it was made specifically to torture Target employees, but I guess it's in the same playlist as Distant for some reason. Overall, when it's good, it's really good, but when it's bad, it's really bad. So, C-, I guess. But for a metalcore romance novel, pretty on par. Ironically enough, nothing really happens in this chapter that warrants a playlist, in my opinion, but it's still a really neat touch that, all jokey elitism aside, is a very cool feature. Alright, I'm gonna sit down again now. After the party and after Mr. Disney villain threatens them, long story short, they have sex finally, and it alternates between being very well written and extremely cringe. Anyways, the entire middle part of this book is basically dedicated entirely to just boning, and I do have plenty of stuff to say about it, but it's way too explicit, so it's gonna have to be on Patreon, but basically, here's all you need to know. The gasping look of surprise on her face as I plunge into her tight At one point, he describes her as tense, which is just a weird word choice. Determination moves through me when I take him into my mouth again. Undertale reference, that's pretty cool. He says the word way too many times. He literally corners her when they're alone and is like, God, I wanna f you, but I can't. And as I slam into her, I'm reminded of something. Her tightens around me. No, stop! Let me out. I want to leave. This is scary. I know glossing over the more explicit part of this book feels anticlimactic, but I promise you, it is the most boring part. Literally, like 40% of this book could be summed up with a sentence, and then they had sex. It has some moments of tension that I think are actually executed pretty well, but I promise you, if you think I'm glossing over the best parts, I am not. There are a few things that I'll discuss later, but I promise you, you're not missing out on much. It's just a lot of this. I want you But anyways, now that they have hooked up and are a couple, there is a new problem. You see, throughout the entire book leading up till this point, they are constantly alluding to the vocalist of the band, Reed, Andy's brother, is extremely overprotective of her and doesn't allow with her to flirt with anyone or smile at anyone, let alone date anyone, without potentially physical violence getting involved. And the book treats this like it's not insane. Other characters throughout the book even chime in like, classic sibling behavior, and it's like, no, it isn't. To be protective over a family member or a loved one's safety makes perfect sense, but my sister isn't allowed to flirt with anyone ever is, like, weird and feels vaguely creepy, and every single person treats as normal. But basically, as they continue to bump uglies throughout the entire middle section of the book, falling deeper and deeper in love, there is a growing tension of no one can find out because it might break up the band, and because we need some additional stakes just kind of shoehorned in. Like, we're supposed to believe this guy is super badass and confident, yet he doesn't have the balls to have a slightly uncomfortable conversation. Like, maybe it's just me, but if this is such a non-issue if everyone communicates like a mature adult. I also get that it's hotter if things are a secret, but like, this whole conflict feels easily avoidable. Anyways, they have sex a couple more times, and they alternate between trauma dumping about their past and boning, which both feels like clunky exposition and totally believable simultaneously. There is a lot, and I mean a lot, of speeches that don't feel like two people talking about their emotions, but like a notes app poetry session, you know? I know it's supposed to come off as like good, deep writing, but it's just distracting because like, no one talks like this. It just comes off as someone trying really hard to appear deep by trying to recall Pierce the Veil lyrics that they only vaguely remember. I'm sorry for complaining, by the way. It's just that this goes on for many chapters, and he says some fedora stuff, and I'm just gonna fast forward until things get more interesting. They decide to go out to another party, and this is when the book takes a turn in a way that tries to raise the stakes even more, but does it in a way that I think is a little inappropriate. You know how Mr. Disney villain Adam Vanderhall showed up and actually set some pretty interesting stakes, you know, banning the band, threatening to expose the bassist identity, which would ruin their public image forever. Those are pretty good stakes, but I guess it didn't really meet the edgy quota because now he starts wearing a Michael Myers mask, following around the main character with a knife, trying to get her, which instantly takes all the real stakes and makes it feel like it takes place in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. It immediately feels hard to believe. Like, as much as the book wants to convince you that he's a legitimate threat now, it just comes off as an attempt to try and make the plot edgier in a way that's kind of disingenuous. Which seems like harmless fun, but then they try and expand on it by having her be, like, traumatized and having the love interest take care of her. But it ultimately just feels inappropriate to try and have a serious conversation around abuse over something that feels so goofy and soullessly tacked on. And I don't know, you could read it for yourself if you want, but to me it really came off as like really cheesy and stupid. And then it tried to treat it with like so much gravity, and it just feels like it feels inappropriate. It doesn't feel like it's handling the situation well. I don't know. I'll move on. Ooh, but credit where credit is due. There is a scene where he chases her around with a knife and a mask through a Halloween party, so no one helps her because they think it's a bit, which, as forced as its inclusion may be, that is a little bit of a compelling and frightening situation. So, you know, that's something. I do picture Scooby-Doo music, but, you know, it's something. There's the classic misunderstanding that forces the two main characters to get into a fight that basic communication skills would have resolved instantly, and I'm not even sure what they're fighting about. It is once again written in, like, the Notes app poetry speak that no one talks in, so whatever back and forth conversation is supposed to be happening gets needlessly muddy. There might not even be a misunderstanding, and it's just them going, my soul is dark and I can't, you're too good for me. I think maybe that's what's happening. I've read a lot of Shakespeare, and this right here, this conflict makes less sense than all of that, which is like barely even English at this point. Like, there's this one sentence where at one point his internal monologue is like, we can't do this. We're both adults with bad childhoods. Which, like, number one, I don't understand what's the holdup. And number two, you won't believe what adults with bad childhoods do quite frequently. It's sex. I just don't understand what the dilemma is supposed to be. Like, they're both 28 and consenting adults, but the book treats that like it's a problem somehow. I don't get it. And then in the middle of all of that, Maddox reveals that his secret past is that his dad was abusive and hurt a lot of people, and he's been arrested many times all over the country when people learn what his last name is because of the association with his dad. And even trying to suspend my disbelief, that doesn't really make much sense. His dad isn't like a serial killer or anything, but he somehow has like Ted Bundy status popularity, despite just being some abuser from North Carolina. This book massively overestimates how popular things can reasonably be, but, you know, flaws in logic aside, it is now finally revealed what his secret is. So why does it feel so extremely anticlimactic? You see, part of the allure, both plot-wise in general and also sexually, since this is a smut book, is figuring out just who this guy is and unraveling the layers of this mysterious figure. But since everyone in this book are childhood friends, there's no mystery. Like, I glossed over it, but he literally takes off his mask and is like, hey, good to see you, in like the very first scene where they talk. That is so anticlimactic. Even when they unveiled their traumatic past to each other, all the characters already know that. Every revelation is not news to anyone except the reader. Plot bombshells need to be dropped on the characters and the audience simultaneously, not just the audience while the characters go, yeah, we know that already. It is just such a wet blanket that gets thrown onto any remotely interesting plot point, and I don't know why I'm giving actual writing critique on the metalcore smut book, but still, these aspects sucked. Like, this whole time, you probably assumed that the characters were also in the dark and feeling the mystery. Nope. It's just us. Without an audience surrogate, there is no mystery. It just feels like we're eavesdropping in on someone else's conversation, and It makes everything feel so goddamn flat. Also, not to nitpick even further, except for I am going to do that. If you were getting arrested because your last name is associated with an abuser that everyone on Earth knows somehow, wouldn't you just, like, change your fucking name? Like, I know that the legal process of getting a name change can be tedious, but if your name alone is causing you to get arrested frequently for no reason at all, and you're, like, 28 and wealthy, I think it's worth the slight legal headache and fine, don't you think? And cops are incompetent as hell, but even then some. Who on earth is arresting people because they have a last name they don't like? I hate the police just as much as the next guy, but even I'm like, I don't think that's a thing. Like, I can guarantee that there are people with the last name Bundy or Gacy who don't get arrested every year because of their name. You know what I mean? I know none of this actually matters, but it just waters down the actual drama of his dad being a bad person, and by association, as a public figure, it might ruin the band. And at this point in the video, you're probably thinking, hey man, we're over halfway through this book, and the only thing that's really happened is the characters went to parties and had sex. So, like, where is the original plot? Where's the live music, the photography, the client rock star dynamic? And you'd be right to be thinking that, because I also felt the same way. Although the plot outline of this book is a concert photographer falls for one of the members of a major band she's working for, paints the picture of a story involving a lot of shows and tension and being on stage. At this point, the band has only been on stage for like one paragraph, and that was during their introduction, by the way. Like, it almost literally does not matter. The plot synopsis paints an interesting picture, but the reality of the book doesn't really offer much. It's like if King Kong was the exact same movie with the exact same plot, but 85% of the movie's runtime was dedicated to being on the boat going to Skull Island. Like, the plot is the same, but it also sort of feels like he got ripped off a little bit, you know? Not that I was particularly invested in the story, and it does follow up on its promise of sex, but even I will admit that the dynamic of being a photographer slowly getting closer and closer to one of your high-profile clients is infinitely more appealing than two people who already know each other hanging out and going to parties and banging for 80% of the book. But worry not, because Young Decay is about to play a show complete with a hype playlist that is softer than the comfort playlist, which doesn't really make sense, but whatever. Maddox mentions something about her sweet cunt being his goddess, which is a real sentence. I did not make that up. And then there's like 6 pages of them getting hyped up to play a show, and then it just cuts to after the show, which is so hilariously anticlimactic. Oh, they're also professional musicians who, like, don't use hearing protection, which, like, that's incorrect. After the show, he celebrates by talking about her cunt again, which once is too many times. They then proceed to do hand stuff on the limo ride back from the show while the limo is full of other people, and he literally makes her come while she's having a conversation with her brother. That's disgusting and completely out of nowhere. I fully understand the, ooh, I hope we don't get caught dynamic, but, like, the way it's executed is not hot at all. It's weird and inappropriate and vaguely incestuous, which is not even the first time this book has done that for no reason. But breezing past how weird and gross what just happened was, they're also, like, counterculture, while also painting a picture of them having borderline extreme wealth. And it is confusing every time. Like, after they get home from the show and then have sex for another chapter, he mentions that him and the jealous brother vocalist Reed live in the same apartment complex, but not on different rooms, on different floors. These guys bought 3 separate entire floors of an apartment complex, which is more than 1 floor per person. That's objectively not necessary. And then she implies that they should become landlords. Hashtag counterculture, I guess. We love landlords here. I know I already joked about this book being kinda Grimes, Elon Musk coded, but it's random conversations like these that really hit home that these characters are all about the performance of counterculture without any inkling in the reality of it. And I know that this tangent seems unnecessary, but there is a random page dedicated to the flexing of the owning of property in the Metalcore smut book. and I'm supposed to not talk about it? Get the fuck out of here. Anyways, after flexing on the pores, they then, and I'm not exaggerating, just randomly decide to go to Andy's old house where she was abused. Just because. The plot reason why they're doing this is because since he buys up so much property, he bought that old house just for like seemingly no reason, just so he could have it, I guess, and then they decide to go to it, despite the only thing that could happen is they feel bad and exposition dump about their past. It's just, why would anyone, every step of that makes no sense. It is an abandoned house that is apparently still in fine condition, with the door unlocked, which, suspension of disbelief included, that's not possible. Squatters easily would have been living in that place for like 8 years, but whatever. She talks in detail about all the abuse her mom did to her, just because we gotta meet an edgy quota, and none of this actually matters to the story. It's just trauma dumping. And then they have sex in the middle of it because, of course, does not seem like the time or place at all, but whatever. This dialogue that could only be described as like Tweaker harassing a girl outside of a gas station, which paired with the gator mask and the fact that they are in an abandoned building, does not make this feel hot and dangerous, but like they're homeless, and it is not a sexy combo, but we're almost done, so we could get through this. However, believe it or not, something interesting happens. I know, Maddox's identity gets leaked, and their legal team is freaking out about it, and there's this really interesting dilemma because half the information that's leaked is true, and half of it is not. They leaked who his father is and what he's done, but they also heavily imply that he's been doing the same thing and just paying people off to cover it up, which, dare I say, is actually an incredibly interesting predicament for one of the characters to be in. And I found myself actually being interested as to what will happen from here, how he will handle this, and like what the outcome will eventually be. And I'll tell you what happens. They have sex again, shocker, and then Young Decay's fan base just somehow knows the truth and is fine with it, and it doesn't linger or fuck up his career at all in any capacity. They literally just set up interesting stakes, and then everyone just goes, it's fine. And then it never comes up again. I'm not joking. It sucks so hard. Not only is that a completely unrealistic outcome, but it completely stomps on the genuinely compelling stakes that were just laid out like 6 pages ago. I know this is a smut book, and I'm focusing on all the details that don't matter, but like, come on, dude, you can't do that. Anyways, there's a big Halloween show, and it's all sold out, and it's only like the second time she's taking photos of them, despite that being her whole job and the plot of the book. Maddox says some really questionable things about her depression completely unprompted, and then books a romantic getaway for just the two of them, which seems really sweet, but he talks about it purely in sexual terms, so all the sweet aspects of it just don't exist. Like, if you're gonna, I'm going off on a thing, if you're gonna book a romantic getaway, the premise should be, you know, like the company of each other, and like having fun together, and being able to travel and experience new things and places with a person that you love, and also sex. Not just sex. Come on, dude. This guy has 2 modes. It's talking about women like they're objects, and it's trying too hard to be deep Tumblr poetry. I know that this dichotomy is supposed to be hot, but there are plenty of guys like this that exist in the real world, and they all suck to be around. And like, I know I'm not the primary demographic. I'm just reading this book because I thought it might make for a funny video, but like, ladies, that's a red flag, right? I'm not going crazy. Please, like, right? Am I wrong? I don't know. I'm moving on. Anyways, they get all dressed up for the Halloween show. He's dressed up as Bane, to which she actually says a really funny joke, like, hey, he could break my back in that outfit, which, like, did get a chuckle out of me. She's dressed up as a character from The Nightmare Before Christmas. Other people are dressed as, like, other band members are dressed as, like, the Joker or something. I don't know. They mention licking boots, which I kind of forgot was a sexual thing. It's been attributed to conservatives for so long that I kind of forgot that there was like a point to it. And then they have the giant Halloween show, which there's like no descriptor about at all, despite being interesting sounding. They just kind of just, you know, brush past it. But while the band is on stage playing, news breaks because a photo of her and the bassist without his mask on kissing goes viral. So now Maddox has been publicly demasked in a way that feels extremely anticlimactic, and there's no longer any stakes for because the fans were just already fine with his identity somehow magically. However, her manager sees the picture and gets pissed and starts slut-shaming her because if she's making out with this guy, who's to say she hasn't been banging every single one of her clients, which is gross, but a realistic depiction of how a job might react in a discriminatory way, and is, to be fair, a legitimate HR problem. And granted, that conflict is way more interesting than the real problem, which is that they've been paying for all of her stuff for 10 days, and she's only taken like 3 photos of them. That's more of a problem, in my opinion, but whatever. But since all this information is public now, that means that once the band gets off the stage, they're going to know that the secret is out, and then Reed is going to find out that they're together, and we can't have that for some reason. And then, stay with me here, Andy gets stabbed by a knife-wielding masked Adam Vanderhall, and then gets kidnapped. And if you think that comes out of nowhere, it does. This is when the book just kinda caves in on itself, trying to think of a cool ending. After the show, Maddox steps off the stage and is like, "Where is Andy? Where is Andy?" Only to step outside the venue and immediately see her being shoved into a trunk, to which he runs over and starts beating up the Disney villain. And if it seems like all of this is happening way too quickly, it is. The Disney villain is stabbing them, and the rest of the band comes over to start beating up Adam Vanderhall, and despite these being very high stakes, it feels like none of this matters at all anymore. Maddox is like, "Everyone, you gotta leave, someone's gotta take the fall for this, and it's gonna be me," which like doesn't make sense, because you don't have to be a lawyer to know what self-defense is. He's trying to kidnap your girlfriend, he stabbed her, he's stabbing you currently. You could like shoot him in the face and be fine legally. There's no stakes here on the legals. I don't know what he's talking about. And then he beats him to death, to which they share a kiss over his bloody corpse. How romantic, and also happens way too fast. This then leads Reed, the jealous brother, to start beating up on Maddox for kissing her, which once again, this is 1 second after his sister was kidnapped, was stabbed his best friend, and then watched his best friend kill a man in cold blood. And his biggest concern right now is that his sister kissed somebody. Fuck this book. I do not care how overprotective he is. That is objectively the least of his concerns, especially if he's overprotective. And then the police show up and they handcuff Maddox and then take him away. No questions, no ambulance, nothing, no medical team for the dead guy or the everyone who's been stabbed. The police just cartoonishly walk in, arrest him, and then walk out. There's no tensions or guns drawn or anything. It's like how a 4th grader thinks arresting people works. In case if it's not clear, this all happens extremely quickly, by the way, and then the epilogue is just like, everything's fine. I got off on self-defense, and the band is bigger than ever. Andy is on thin ice with her job after sleeping with a client, so they're just booking her on local indie gigs, which is not how local photography works at all. If they're indie, then why is a record label flying out a photographer to shoot their gig? The cost of that alone is like 30 times what the show itself will make in total, so that doesn't even make any sense. It ends with them being a happy couple who is public. Maddox doesn't have to wear his mask anymore, and then they dirty talk in front of the brother, which makes him uncomfortable and is also weird because why would they even do that? Maddox mentions he has a ring in his pocket, implying that he wants to ask her to marry him, and then it ends. What a book. Is anyone still here? If you are, I can't believe we made it through that, because that was a lot. But now that we're done, my biggest issue is that every character thinks that they're deep, but they just aren't, and it makes it really hard to like them. The vast majority of internal monologues feel like a Tumblr post, and a decent chunk of the writing is kind of like how I imagine a 13-year-old thinks what it's like to be in a band. It makes the whole thing feel very juvenile and unrealistic. Like the level of fame that the band has is like Michael Jackson level, which once again, this is a metalcore band. What are we talking about? Like the whole time I both felt too young and too old to be reading this. Like its tone is constantly shifting between feeling like it's specifically written for 14-year-olds only to immediately shift into feeling like it was written for a 38-year-old Disney adult who loves Avenged Sevenfold. So I'm not I'm not really sure who the primary demographic is supposed to be. I mean, it's very clear that it's successfully aiming towards a very Red State Rock Festival, older millennial, younger Gen X crowd, which is a genius demographic to market a romance novel towards, but the whiplash of 18 plus maturity straight into immaturity, I just never got used to. Also, for a book entirely marketed on being a metalcore romance, there is not one mention of what the band sounds like, by the way. Every single time them playing gets brought up, it is almost exclusively written in a way that's like, they played and it ruled. Anyways, like, I know that there's probably not that much to say, but for a whole book around metalcore romance, you'd think that there would be like a single descriptor of the music, but that never once comes up somehow. One of the only explicit descriptors that we get of their music is that some songs were inspired by the Nightmare Before Christmas songs, which does not paint a good picture. Obviously, I wasn't expecting them to sound like End or Converge, but like this sentence immediately made me go, oh, they're one of those. Uh-oh. Also, despite the playlist being a very cool feature, every time music does get discussed to any degree in the book, it's written in a way where it feels like the characters were supposed to be talking about the music on said playlists in the text, but like for whatever legality copyright reasons, maybe it had to be removed and the playlist is like a workaround? Maybe? I don't know. Like, there's a point where they are clearly talking about My Chemical Romance, but they're tiptoeing around any exact information in a way that's stilted and weird. Like, two people gushing over a song that they love would not tiptoe about it in such a weird way. It's a very smart workaround, but for a metalcore romance to never once, like, mention music in any substantial direct way, it kind of feels like it's lacking in that regard. But maybe that element gets improved in the follow-up books. That's right, this is not a one-off book. This is the first in the Young Decay trilogy, each one following a member of the band as they fall in love, but probably mostly just fuck a lot. So if you're curious and you want to learn more, there is a whole 2 extra books if you want to check it out. No, I will not be doing a video on it. I do not want to. The author also sells Young Decay merch, which, credit where credit is due, is actually really smart and like a genuinely cool concept. There's tons of stuff that I completely glossed over, and if you have any interest in reading this book or the rest of the series for yourself, please do. Overall, the book is not that great, but despite my harsh criticisms, I mean no ill will, like, sincerely. There are aspects of it that I did like and appreciated what it was going for, and there's one scene that I did like, but I can't talk about it on YouTube, otherwise the algorithm will get mad at me. There were a few sentences where, although not explicitly incorrect, something is like off grammatically. I wonder if he's as eager to learn if last night affected him deep within my soul as I am to know if it did him, because it had. Like, that's just a mess of a sentence. I am ragging on it a lot for the sake of jokes, and I do stand by my criticisms, but I do appreciate the vision, and I hope that the author can improve their craft, because, like, writing books is hard, dude. I can't do that shit. But I just wanted to do a romance video for Valentine's Day, and even though I am a bit late, there is never a bad time for romance, so I hope you enjoyed. Huge thanks to all my Patreon supporters for making videos like these possible. I love you all very much. Mwah. If you want to hear all the explicit stuff that I just straight up cannot talk about on YouTube, including a few positive points, there is an exclusive partner piece up right now for y'all to check out if you want. I hope you don't mind this like sloppy filler video. As much as I love making like super big high effort stuff, it also is exhausting, and I wanted to do something a little bit more chill and gimmicky and like a throwback to when my channel was new. Anyways, follow me on stuff if you want, buy some merch if you want, share this video if you want, and I don't know, I'm tired. That's it. Thanks for watching. Love ya. Bye.